Every single person, or more or less every old-timer in the rural parts of Western Virginia, have their own version of what happened. Hell, even if half the young people knew what the elders had known for a very long time here in Virginia, they would never want to go camping ever again. It's like a game of he say, she say, really just passed around as rumors, until you go and find out for yourself. In 2014, I ventured off with a few friends, Henry, Andrew, Sarah, and Jessica, out into the wilderness where we went camping for the weekend. Me and my friends had packed our bags, packed enough food to last us for days, equipment, flashlights, radios, everything you can possibly think of. And especially after watching a lot of horror movies and seeing what happens in the middle of the woods, if you're left without equipment of course, things could really end up going south if you're not well prepared. This was all my friend Sarah's idea, as of course it was her 26th birthday, and being that she was dating one of my best friends, Andrew, at the time, we couldn't just say no to her and not fulfill her wish, so we ended up taking the weekend off from our jobs, school, just to venture out for the weekend, get away, get some fresh air, just re-energize before going back into the real world. Just having to talk about this now to strangers that I don't even know really gives me anxiety, and I'm hoping that after this, I don't fall back into the vice grips of depression, but this is my story. In May of 2014, on a particular Friday, myself and 4 of my friends ventured out into the wilderness of Virginia, which we only expected to stay for the weekend, leaving Sunday morning, which gave us the opportunity to catch up for the week ahead. Now, to skip through all the boring parts of us having to get there, once we had arrived to this specific location, and the minute we got out the car, I immediately knew something was off. The atmosphere, the vibe, it was just too quiet. Of course, I ventured out into the woods before, but nothing really like this. The wilderness, it was dense, and especially in the night, one of my worries were if someone were to get lost, it would be incredibly hard to find them considering how dense the woods were. Which, shortly after, once we were done setting up camp, my friend Henry had stumbled upon an opening that seemed to have led inside of some cave. I didn't really know what to expect. I mean, caves really aren't my thing. I've seen lots of movies where people get trapped in caves, and I wasn't trying to go inside of this one. My friends were kind of excited, and for no reason at all. I mean, it's just a cave. What more can really lie inside this cave other than just bats and lots of dirt and insects perhaps, and I really had no interest of going inside. My friend Sarah kind of tempted me and the rest of us in going inside just to take a look, and at that point, I seemed to have been the only one that disagreed and wanted to go inside. My friends kept pressuring me and calling me names, of course jokingly, so I ended up simply going with the flow and followed them inside. Once inside, I had this painful feeling in my gut that something was off. Of course, in the beginning, the cave looked massive, and my friends wanted to go deeper inside. Luckily enough, we were prepared. We had cell phones, flashlights, and my friend Henry had a knife. So, if worse came to worse and we came across some giant mutant bat, at least we had the means to defend ourselves by having a weapon with us. As we kept going deeper inside the cave, however, we began to smell something, and it smelled like rotten flesh, almost as if something had died inside. Really, no surprise. It's a cave after all, so we just all assumed that a random coyote or wolf must have died inside. And as we kept going deeper and deeper into the cave, I went to turn around to talk to my friend Andrew and having to ask him for a bottle of water, being that he was carrying the most amount of equipment, and I knew that he had been behind me the entire time, but when I turned around to ask him, he just wasn't there. I quickly told the group ahead of us, "Hey, where's Andrew?" As Sarah went on to ask, "Wasn't he behind you?" As I replied, "Well, yeah, Andrew?" Originally, the first thing that crossed my mind was he was probably going to play a prank on us and scare us in the dark. I mean, it wasn't dark enough within the cave for us not to see, but still dark enough for someone to hide in the shadows while we're standing there unsuspecting of what's watching us from the other side. And being that now, one of our friends just suddenly went missing, it was best if we took our interest in leaving the cave before things really got worse, but not before trying to find Andrew. And the first thing I said to the group was, "Okay, well, be prepared. He's probably going to play a prank on us." As Sarah insisted, "No, Andrew doesn't play pranks. He's not a prankster." As I insisted, well, of course, back in middle school, he used to play pranks all the time. As Sarah gave me reassurance, this is not middle school. He's grown out of that, and for him just to go missing or walking away like that is completely out of his character. As we began to look around, we began to hear something. It sounded like something was being torn, gagging. We can hear squirms in the dark, but really, we had no idea what it was. But then, I started to hear sounds that, eerily enough, sounded like gargling, as if someone was drowning, but we weren't near any water. I mean, sure, the cave was steep, but not steep enough for there to be water. So, where was that gargling coming from? As I quickly remembered that I had a flashlight on me, I turned it on and began to shine my light in the dark. I really couldn't see much, until I quickly noticed from the corner of my eye that something had whizzed past me, and it was fast. I couldn't tell what it was, but I know that whatever it was, it had to have been dragging something with it. Perhaps maybe a carcass? Was that the smell of the animal that perhaps had died inside? Maybe we had stumbled across a bear, and if that was the case, we were not prepared for a bear. But only then, I really wish what I saw was a bear, but it wasn't. As I quickly had turned the corner to see what exactly had moved, I noticed that whatever had ran past the corner of my eye definitely had been dragging something. As I began to follow the trail, only then I saw Andrew's watch, and then one of his sneakers. Originally, I really thought he had been playing a prank, but as I continued to follow, and as I continued to go deeper in the cave, suddenly, to my horror, I saw Andrew's body there, but there was something on top of it. Something big. It was dark and slimy looking. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was really hoping that this was a prank. The gargling that I heard, the tearing sounds that I heard, that was coming from Andrew. Andrew was gargling on his own blood, and his flesh being torn apart by whatever was on top of him. I was so terrified that I couldn't even scream. I couldn't even move. My eyes just stared on, wide open. I froze. My heart literally sank to the bottom of my feet. And as I was looking at this thing, literally eating my friend alive, this thing didn't look like anything I've ever seen before. Not in any movie, not in any story, not in any book. This thing looked like the literal embodiment of a demon. And I didn't know what it was. It had scaly-like skin. It was slimy, very dark. Its fingers were long and skinny, and its nails seemingly as sharp as knives. This thing was barefoot. I could see its nails just grasping onto Andrew's flesh, clinging onto his body almost as if it was going to be its last meal. When I began to choke and move backwards very slowly, suddenly, this thing slowly raised its head, removing its drooling jaws from Andrew's torso as it slowly stood up and looked behind. And when I saw this thing, all I could describe was a demon. I didn't know what it was. Its eyes were as black as night. Its teeth looked like something of an anaconda and a great white shark mixed together. Its jaws were huge. It didn't look like this thing had any ears or a nose, but just big black eyes, and the huge mouth just filled with razor-sharp teeth. And in between his teeth, I saw Andrew's flesh, his skin hanging off of his teeth, blood dripping down from its mouth. I didn't know what to do, so the first thing I thought about was running away, which I did. And as I proceeded to do so, the minute I began to run, whatever this was let out a horrifying screech. This screech echoed throughout the entire cave, and I literally thought my life was going to end before my very eyes. I thought that this thing was about to grab me and make me its next meal. And as I was running, I can hear this thing running behind me, almost as if it was running on all fours. I can hear its nails scratch against the rocks as it got closer and closer to me. I didn't know if this thing was blind, I didn't know if this thing was deaf, but whatever it was after me. I was screaming for my friends. I dropped everything I had, including my backpack, my phone. All I really had was my flashlight. And I was trying to find my way back outside the cave, but I was directionless. I was screaming for my friends, hoping that someone would hear me. Until then, I heard the scream of a woman. And wherever it came from, it seemed to have been behind me, somewhere deeper in the cave. Perhaps maybe Sarah or Jessica. One of them must have ventured out even deeper into the cave. But if this thing was running after me, then why in the world would I be hearing these screams? Unless whatever was chasing me wasn't alone. Perhaps there were more. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know if I should have turned back in trying to help my friends during their time of need, but if I were to do that, then this thing that was chasing me, it would have ultimately gotten its hold on me and, perhaps worse, killed me. I continued to run blindly in the cave. I didn't know where I was going. Suddenly, I can hear my friend Henry from the other side of the cave. He was crying out my name. Derek! Derek, get out! I was running after the sound of his voice, and I was hoping that I could find the exit quickly enough for me to escape. And during all of this, I can hear Henry in front of me just screaming out my name, while behind me, I hear the screams of a woman. And then, as the screams intensified, that very same screech that I had heard, coming from whatever it is that saw me, I heard that too, except there were multiple screeches, coming from multiple different directions. At that point, I saw the exit, and I saw my friend Henry and Sarah standing there, in complete tears, paranoid, shocked. They were screaming for me to exit the cave, and as I ran out, I took a look behind me and noticed that whatever it was that was chasing me wasn't there anymore. I ran out in a pool of sweat. I fell down the floor, my knees buckled, and I didn't know what to think anymore. I was screaming at my friends while they were screaming back at me. Where's Jessica? Where's Jessica? As Sarah had pointed out while she was crying, that while they were walking around inside the cave in hopes of finding Andrew, suddenly this thing jumped down from the ceiling and latched its jaws onto Jessica's face. Sarah, in a heap of panic, didn't know what to do, so she just began to run. And while outside the cave entrance, panicking and trying to figure out what to do next, we could hear these things inside of the cave. And we can hear Jessica's screams begin to die down, along with sounds of flesh being torn. We knew that whatever these things were, they were feeding on her, and they were feeding on Andrew. I told Sarah that in fact I did find Andrew, but whatever was left of him. We all began to break down. We didn't know what to do. It was only then that we understood that both Jessica and Andrew were dead. And if we were to tell this story to anybody, they would think we're crazy. But we did go to the police. We quickly jumped inside our car and drove down to the nearest police department where we had reported what had just happened. And only then, once we came down with the police and pointing out the exact location of this cave, several officers walked in with their guns, flashlights, but they couldn't find a single thing. I had told them that I saw Andrew's watch and Andrew's shoe on the floor, but even then, the cops came back out and had reported that they didn't find any watch and or shoe on the floor. They couldn't find a carcass, they didn't find any bodies, they didn't find any blood, nothing. Just skid marks on the floor, with scratches or seemingly enough marks on the rocks. We had told them that whatever it was that was after us perhaps made those marks on the rocks due to their nails having to be incredibly sharp looking. The cops then had informed us that they're going to conduct a full search for our friends, but there was no guarantee that whatever it was that we saw was still going to be there. They began to question us and asking us if we had taken any hallucinogens or maybe drugs, and we furiously responded by saying no. Take notes that 5 years later, ever since those events, none of us have been the same. The police, they never found a body. they never found a single thing in that cave. But what stuck with us was the memory of our friends and the memory of what we had with them before they were taken from us, but also for the memory of myself and being there for that very moment when I saw this thing lift itself up off my dead friend's body, slowly turn around, and stare directly at me with such evil intent. I knew that if I did not take any action at that given point, my life would have ended. Until this day, I will never step foot into any cave, and I am never going to go within the wilderness ever again.